Hey, this recording is for Intro to Typography class. I just wanted to cover some basics on setting up an environment to design type in Illustrator. So I'm just going to cover setting up artboards and your horizontal guides for creating type. And here we go. So I'm going to create a new document here. You can name it whatever you want. I'm going to go ahead and set up the artboards to be 6 centimeters by 6 centimeters. You can pick whatever size scale you want here. And I'm going to set up just 2 artboards. You'll want to set up many more artboards than this because you'll have many more letters to design. I'm just going to use 2 for this example so I don't have to lay them all out. You can organize them however seems best to you based on the characters that you're designing. And you don't need any bleeds or anything like that, just basic artboards here. And then we'll create the document. And so I have my square artboard here, and you'll see there's another one to the side of it here. It's kind of handy to have artboards side by side, so when you go to arrange your artboards, having them all arranged so can be helpful, and I'll show you why here in a second. If you go to File, Document Setup, and then Edit Artboards, you can actually edit the size of these and the position of these as you please. I'm going to not do that because they're arranged how I want them. But yeah, so if I zoom out here, you can see that I've got my 2 artboards, and those are each going to house one letter that I'll design. But for now, I'm going to focus on setting up guides because when we set up a type design, we want to have very universal measurements for like the heights of our letters here. I'm just going to focus in on the first of the 2 artboards here. And for the measurements I'll be using here, I'll turn on my rulers with Command R. I'm going to just use arbitrary measurements as far as how high or how low. You can decide the proportions for your typeface. But these will be just general suggestions for where you might want to place your guides. So the first one I'm going to drag down. I'll put it maybe a third of the way down the document here, something like that. This is going to be my baseline, so I'm going to go ahead and just type out labels here as I go. And let's see. A little smaller. There we go. All right, so now I've got a label for my baseline here, and I'll be copying that for a few other guides here. So the baseline, of course, is what your letters rest on, so the letter will sit above this primarily. And there's a lot of space below, and that's because we're going to have descenders included here. So the next height that I'm going to decide here is going to be my capital height. And I'm going to go ahead and put that somewhere up in here. And again, it's pretty arbitrary. I'm just deciding the height of my letter right here, right now. You can pick wherever you want. But you're going to need to leave yourself a little bit of space above this as well. So this is the cap height. And then after cap height, I'm actually going to set my ascender height because those are different. So ascenders tend to be a little bit higher than your cap height. It's a little bit exaggerated here. Usually it's only a small margin above the cap height, but to keep things nice and readable, I'll give it a little bit extra space. And ascenders. Coming up here. And then there are a few other heights that we're interested in here. We're interested in like a crossbar height, or a cross height, and we're interested in an X height and a descender. So I'm going to go ahead and put a cross height. I'm going to put that slightly above halfway between the baseline and the cap height or ascender, kind of the top of the type. So it's going to be up just a little bit. You'll notice like these spaces are close to equal but not quite, right? And I raise it up just a little bit so that things feel a little more stable when we put crossbars in letters like H, for example. Okay, and then let's go ahead and make our X height. So generally speaking, an X height will be anywhere between halfway and maybe like 3/4 of the way up the size of your type. So I'm gonna put it up here, kind of in the middle, and I'll add another label for this. And one of the reasons that the X height is so high, you might think that it's supposed to be half the height. It's really not. If you look at type, the higher the X height, the more readable a font tends to be. So you'll notice this is like probably 3/4 of the height of a cap, this R is, right? So it's up there pretty high, and this is a pretty readable screen font. Obviously that'll vary depending on the style of font that you create. Excuse me. Now we have one more line that we want to set, and that's a descender. Again, it's up to you, so I'm just going to pick a descender depth that's like a little bit below the baseline here. I'm just trying to imagine if I had a letter about this tall, how much more something would extend below the baseline. And you can use other fonts for an example, right? Like this G is just hanging down a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and use that as an example. And set up my descender guide. So this is an example of many of the guides that you would want to have when you're designing a font. These are your base guides. There could be more. There could be fewer if you really don't care about like cross height or something like that. Maybe that's variable in your font. If you have specific rules for yourself, certain serifs that you want guides for, feel free to add them in. But this is just a baseline for how you might set up your document. I'll have other videos on other design aspects, but this is the start.